Hi, once again, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. Continuing this podcast on recognizing the omnipotence of God, I think I've got this great inspiration which kind of ties a lot of these things together. And it's in this podcast, hopefully, you will get the information that you can share with anyone who says, science is so different from, religion, and science shows there is no God. Today I'll be comparing artificial intelligence and what I'm calling intrinsic intelligence. So quickly, artificial intelligence, we gather a lot of information. We gather information and we store it in memory somewhere that is accessible to these computers so they can make fairly intelligent decisions. So again, all knowledge really is comprised of. Matter of fact, I should go into the definition of what I think an updated definition of knowledge is required here. I am saying that knowledge is useful information in accessible memory. Yes, useful information in accessible memory. And in the case of machines, yes, we have servers all over the world. But if you, for instance, you can Google anything, it goes to a server somewhere and pull up that information for you. It's in accessible memory. And so with artificial intelligence, we have machines. We give them enough information that they can query things and come up with fairly intelligent decisions. But I want to focus on what I'm calling intrinsic intelligence, which really is something that the logical deduction from this is that there is a supreme creator, and again, use this. So what is this intrinsic intelligence? Well, let's talk about knowledge. Everything we know, it's basically information stored in our memory. When we practice, regardless of whether you're a doctor, an attorney, a race car driver, baseball player, or somebody just doing academics, we know things. So whenever we hear KNOW, know, that is basically about information in accessible memory. If it's in your memory and you can access that useful information, you have knowledge. And so we use that to say this is intelligence, intellectual and intelligence, but it has to do with information in accessible memory, yours or somewhere else. If it's in someone else, you can't access that, so you don't have that knowledge. Well, this is something we have observed, and all science is first observing, then really seeking the answers to this. And so really this is scientific. We can look out in nature, and if we look at a colony of ants, we will see that there are different roles within that anthill. When we look in the nest, we'll see, yes, different ants have different roles. When I talked about the corolla spider or the archerfish, right, we see what we are observing everywhere. And just like DNA, this occurs everywhere. And it seems to be in concert with DNA, really. But it's really about knowledge. So when we look at a bee, for instance, just the honeybee knows how to make honey. I don't know how to make honey. I'm not sure if you know how to manufacture honey. That knowledge is the result of information stored in their accessible memory. When we talk about like the corolla spider, this is a good example you can use as well. The corolla spider, it digs into a hole, and while it's digging, it knows to how to identify quartz crystals. Knows, which means it has information in its accessible memory. It has that intrinsic intelligence of what is a quartz crystal and how the properties of that quartz crystal can be used to benefit itself in obtaining something to eat, basically. So this is what I'm talking about. This intrinsic intelligence is something that is imparted because the spider does not learn that from its parents. It has no written or oral tradition. This is imparted somewhere deep within that spider. Just like within us, our immune system has knowledge of how to act when we are invaded by some foreign object or bodies or whatever, foreign organisms. Our immune system knows, so there is information. Just like with us, we don't. If you have never been trained on playing tennis or in math or in computer programming, you would not know that. That information has to be in your memory. You have to have training and you retain that. Now you know how to do it. Similarly, we see all through nature. We see birds, fish, again, the spider, and I like to use the corolla or the bola spider because like the bola spider, which all spiders spin web, knowing how to spin web, that is the product of intrinsic intelligence. That is information stored somewhere in their accessible memory that they can retrieve that information and spin a web. They can retrieve this information, like the case of the archerfish when it is about to shoot and even making correction for parallax between water and air to see that insect that it intends to eat. It has to know how to aim, how to power that jet of water. So all of this, it has to know this. This is information that is stored within its accessible memory. So again, you think of a mosquito. It knows how to target its host. So this knowledge with a virus, with everything we are seeing in nature, this intrinsic intelligence. And here is the real kicker to this. Think about all of these creatures, even trees. We're finding out now, like the acacia bush. They were saying that if I was listening to this naturalist thing about this tree, if it's being eaten, it sends off this gas, so the other trees know, and they start producing chemicals that make them, difficult to digest or actually poisonous. So the trees know this. So it's now becoming apparent that all living things, just like they have DNA, they also have memory because they all have knowledge. And this intrinsic intelligence is lodged somewhere. Now, with us, we know about memory. We accept that. But where is memory stored? And there is a difference. We can speculate about, the synapses and all these connections with neurons and all this stuff. But there is a major difference between speculating about it and computer memory, where we write it, we can encrypt it and store it, and we can access it. If we had that ability today, we would never need a lie detector because we would simply put some leads on somebody somewhere, access that memory, decrypt it if necessary, and we can replay any experience that you had because it's in your memory. We talk about some things you may seem to have forgotten, but it's still in your memory. It's about retrieving it. If we had that would be godlike powers, because we can simply strap you in and replay any part of your memory. We may be able to quantify, as with computers, right? This has 1 terabyte, or this is a petabyte or exabyte or whatever of memory. We would be able to quantify and access that memory. We may or may not ever have that ability, but we know that there is memory there and information is stored in that memory because that's what we use. That's what we refer to as knowledge. Useful information in accessible memory. Well, we are seeing this throughout nature. And the real kicker is this. I like to put this kind of simplistically. If we consider every creature, every organism that exists, plant or animal, as a unique DNA configuration, because it's that configuration of DNA which results in all the physical characteristics of that organism, plant or animal. Well, someone somewhere knows what intrinsic intelligence has to be stored with every configuration of DNA. Think about that for a moment. So a tree, there is this, because you can't implant or embed the information from a spider in a bird. And then even different species of spider, they need different, because some spin webs, some live in holes, some, they crawl around and jump on things, like the Portia spider that seems to learn different techniques. So even within species, they all require different intrinsic intelligence to be implanted in their memory so that they know how to thrive. They know how to survive. And think about that. So if you have a source that knows for the billions or the billions of DNA configurations, knows exactly what intrinsic intelligence has to be embedded and knows how to embed it. It's like us. We, software engineering, I've worked on encryption and all this stuff, so we can say, okay, yeah, and I can shard things, I can say split up between all these pieces and we retrieve from here, and we can have, all these things so they fail over and all that stuff. Well, we don't know because we don't have access to memory. We really, in science, this is one area where we don't have control. We don't fully understand how and where memory, the memory in living things, whether plant or animal. But by observing, at this point in science, we can simply observe that there is that intrinsic intelligence in every living thing. And so the fact that there must be one source that knows every DNA configuration is able to design that intrinsic intelligence that goes with every DNA configuration and store it. And store it in a way that's, as of now, we don't have access to that, right? We don't have access to that memory and that information in there. Else we would know, what a spider knows. How do they spin web? We be able to access that and say, oh, it's this and this. But that intrinsic intelligence is implanted in every spider, every fish, every plant. Like I said, even our immune systems have that intrinsic intelligence. And so the being that designed that the information and stored it in that memory in every DNA configuration, so everyone alive is born with that intrinsic intelligence. Everything that exists, everything that's alive has a special version, right? And it may be by species. All of these species gets the same, or they may be different. But for one source to know, to design that, and know what memory is in there so that it can implant that memory so that a spider just seems to come up, a fish, it knows exactly what to do. You look at a frog, a fish, a bird, it knows what to do because many of them do not have that parental education. They have no written or oral. And so this intrinsic intelligence that is imparted to every living thing is proof that there is a source that designed that intelligence and thus must know must know what every species and every plant and animal needs. And it knows how to implant it in there so that it is accessible by that plant and animal. So, because we see in all ecosystems, right, we see how things work together. Something exists at a higher level and it dies, something else comes along, even like the dung beetle, right? It knows, come around, take this, the maggots and all that. They know. The flies can detect something that has died. You have the vultures, they're like, oh yeah. And so in defining an ecosystem, every single living organism has that intrinsic intelligence. And obviously it is designed by one source. So when you have one source that knows what is to be implanted in every living thing for the benefit of that individual, it is obviously the supreme, the Almighty God. And so this is something that you can take to anyone in science because it's a logical thing. We observe knowledge displayed by all of these animals. And so up until now, because we cannot access memory in living things, it's just a theoretical thing. But we can observe that. Just as we observed that the sun does not go around the earth, and with DNA and all of these things in time. But right now it's a theoretical but very logical discussion that you can have with anyone that says that there is this divide with science and religion, because ultimately it comes back to, with intrinsic intelligence, here is the irrefutable proof that there is a source of knowledge that recognizes every configuration of DNA and the appropriate knowledge that has to be imparted, the appropriate intrinsic intelligence that's in a mosquito, a frog, a bird, a fish, and even us. Our immune system has an intrinsic intelligence as well. So this, I want to thank you for taking the time to review this, and I hope you would use it. And again, pick up a copy of Humanity's Inflection Point, because this is what it's about. It's that inflection point when we recognize that science is truth. But within science, we will find, when we look close enough, and this is it, intrinsic intelligence shows us that even the information that we observe in science will bring us back to recognizing the Creator. So I want to thank you again for taking the time and recognize there is no coincidence. It's a series of conscious decisions that you made that got you to this information. So until next time, I want to thank you again, and may God bless. Take care.